Welcome to Twisted Remedies. I'm your host, Justin Couture, and this is a podcast about the benefits of jiu-jitsu and other non-traditional remedies in trauma recovery. Welcome back, everybody, to Twisted Remedies podcast. I am here today with somebody who I could probably talk to and fill 3, maybe 4 episodes, but we're going to try to we'll try to streamline this and dial it in. My guest today is Professor Rob Magao. Rob is a third-degree black belt under Master Pedro Sauer, black belt in combatives from Matt Larson's Combatives University. He is the owner-operator of 2 Pedro Sauer affiliates in Connecticut. Podcast host, The Code Podcast. 25 years of law enforcement experience. 18 of those was on SWAT, so lots of, and from what I understand, there was narcotics work. There was all kinds of SRO work. Just you probably checked every box in the field. Founder of the Officer Survival Series, which is a de-escalation through confidence program. I think we're going to talk a bunch about that, and has experience in Muay Thai, judo, and wrestling, among probably other things that I haven't touched on. So, Rob, thanks for being here, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be here.
Any of that anything I left out that's of great importance, or that something I messed up that you want to fill in the blanks on?
That was great.
Excellent. So when I have people on who have martial arts background, I tend to start with like what got you started in martial arts, because I think, the goal obviously of this is for people who don't train, is to get them to train, especially cops, first responders, veterans, those populations. But really anybody, I think, out there who doesn't, anytime they hear a story of how somebody got into training, I think it can maybe help them, because there may be some commonalities that they can feed off of. So how did you come to get started in martial arts?
Yeah, it's funny. I was always intrigued by the martial arts, even when I was a young kid. Whether it was the movies and stuff like that. And I was an '80s kid, so I grew up watching all the ninja movies, and before that, Bruce Lee, and then all into the Steven Seagal era, and Jean-Claude Van Damme, all that. So that was, we didn't have the UFC back then, so that was kind of our taste of martial arts. That and Black Belt magazine, if I could scrounge up enough money to buy a copy of it. So I was always intrigued by the martial arts. And I was probably in about the 3rd or 4th grade, and we had an after-school program that was starting at our elementary school, and it was judo. And one of my friends, who I'm still friends with to this day, Matt Benzie, he became a trooper in Connecticut, and he's retired now as well. He's like, "Hey, we should do this." So we ended up signing up for it, and that was my first martial arts experience, was traditional judo. And Sensei Lenny LeBlanc was the guy's name. He's passed away since, but he was an awesome instructor. He actually taught from a wheelchair at the time, because he had lost part of a leg. But he was a phenomenal instructor. And, it's so long ago now. I'm in my 50s, and I was probably 7 or 8 years old back then, 9 years old. And, the amount of time we did it for, I couldn't even tell you, a year or 2. But it left a profound effect on me. And, and then when that program kind of stopped in our school, I kind of came from a family, we didn't really have a whole lot. So there was no real way for me to go take martial arts at a commercial place. So kind of ended for me at that point for a little while, until I became a teenager. And then when I got a job and had enough money to kind of do stuff for myself a little bit, I started looking around, and I kept comparing everything I would go to look at from what I received, as a kid, and I just couldn't find anything. Every school I went into was the traditional McDojo, I guess, of the 80s, late 80s, where they were fighting each other with pool noodles and having water gun fights, and getting a stripe every class, and it was just not anything I was interested in doing. And one day I was just working in a grocery store, and this woman that worked there, who I barely ever talked to, she just started talking to me one day, and she's like, "Oh, talking about her husband and how he had all these bruises, and from this martial arts class he was going to." And I'm like, "Well, where is this?" She goes, "I don't know. It's some guy's house. They got like a barn in the backyard up in Putnam, Connecticut." And yeah, and I was like, "Oh, really?" So I kind of got the directions as to where it was from. And I ended up, I did a lot of bike riding back then. I was big into mountain biking and stuff. So I was just going by there one day. I saw the house, and there was a sign um, in the front yard where the entrance to the driveway. The house kind of sits up on a hill, and it was in kanji, Japanese kanji. You couldn't even read it. So I went up and knocked on the door, and this woman answered the door. She only opened the door like a little bit. It's like kind of a kung fu movie, you know. She opened the door like a little bit, and she's like, "Hello," and I'm like, "Yeah, I saw the sign down there, and one of my friends says that her husband trains here, does martial arts." And I didn't even know what such system it was. I didn't do nothing, you know. And there's no internet back then. There's no Facebook.
Right.
There's no anything.
Right.
It's just a sign on the side of the road. And I don't know if I'm going to get abducted here or what. But I'm like, hey, you know, is there martial arts here? And she's like, she closes the door. And then a couple of minutes goes by. Well, a minute, maybe a few seconds, I should say, 20 seconds. And the door opens again. She goes, if you're interested, come back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. So I'm like, all right. So the next
If
night,
that's not the makings of an 80s like karate movie,
oh yeah. And I
I don't know
swear,
what it.
listen, I swear on my life 10 times over, this is the truth, right? So
That is an amazing story.
so then I'm like a teenager, like, you know, 17 or so. So the next day I get a bunch of friends together, and like 5 of us, and we go up there, and we're gonna watch this thing. So we go up, get there, and as we get in, they're already like, this is a very traditional, old school Okinawan Goju-ryu and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu school. And the instructor, Paul Zamitis, also had boxing background, and he was in the military. Very tall, got like 6'4", like 220, kind of intimidating, mustache, big guy. And he you know, said, "Oh yeah, come on in, have a seat." So, you know, we're watching, and it was disciplined and, you know, very regimented, and it was militant, and all the things that you don't see anymore, basically.
Right.
And so we're watching, and, you know, we all kind of get the giggles because we're teenagers and we don't really know what we're watching. And at the end, you know, fast forward 2 hour class. At the end, he comes over to us, and he goes right down the line, starting with my furthest friend. And I remember all of them who was with me at the time. And he's like, to Kyle and to Kevin and to Mike and all right down the line. He's like, shakes their hand. He's like, "You won't be back. You won't be back. You won't be back. You won't be back." And he gets to me. He shakes my hand. He said, "Maybe." And then he walked away.
No explanation.
And no explanation. And I came back the next day, and I became one of 4 black belts he ever promoted.
Wow.
He was the best man at my wedding too.
That is a wild. That's probably the best. How did I get into martial arts story that I've had on the show so far? That's great.
If you got a real quick second, I'll finish the story for you. So
sure.
I end up training with him for years. I get my black belts under him. And it was to this day probably the hardest training I've ever received, as far as physically hard. And there was things about it that I think could have been updated, but there was also things about it that were very, very, very combative oriented, and I really liked it. And he had, like I said, he had a boxing background too, so the sparring sessions were pretty good. It wasn't like normal karate schools.
Right.
I would say Kyokushin, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, where you're really kind of hitting each other and stuff. And if it went to the ground, he would allow it. He wouldn't stop it. Like, he would still go. And so anyways, you know, years later, been friends with him ever since, him and his wife and everything. And he's obviously significantly older than me. He's in his 70s now. And he, you know, as he got older, he got developed some health issues. And just about a week ago, his wife calls me and she goes, "You know, he's not doing well. He's that you have hospice here now. So, you know, we probably should come up and see him." So I went up there to see him, and same driveway, same house. Walk in the back door. He's got a kind of an add-on that he did to his house, which is like a glass room that he loved. And the dojo is literally right off the back of the house. So I'm sitting by his bed, his hospital bed in his house. The sign that used to be at the end of the road is leaning up against the back of the property line, kind of all weathered. The school that we used to train in is right there. And, you know, he's hanging on to life as we speak. So
wow.
Kind of a full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
crazy to see someone that was so powerful and strong and invincible in my mind when I was a teenager. And, you know, Father Time is undefeated.
Yeah, that's cool that he's still nearby though, and you can go and see him, and
Yep.
that's super good.
So that's how I got into martial arts.
Yeah, and then at some point, you, like I mentioned at the beginning, you end up training under Pedro Sauer. How does that come
So
to happen?
when 1993, I started training in that system with that instructor back in the late 80s. And then
Yep.
it was 1993 when I saw the first UFC, and I didn't even see it the night it came out because didn't have any way of watching it, and didn't have the money to watch it probably either. And one of the guys at the school, he got a copy of it somehow a few months later, and we all sat down and watched it. And he had already watched it. He was an older guy, had his career and stuff. And I remember him coming in the next day. I couldn't wait for him to get there because I'd always seen in the magazines, with Gracie Challenge and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but really didn't even know what it was. And I kept hearing about this tournament. So he comes in, he's like, "Oh yeah, it was really good." The guy, dismantled everybody. It was really cool to watch. So then when I saw the video, I watched the matches and I was like, I gotta learn this. I don't know how I'm gonna learn this, but I gotta learn this. I just had this draw to it. And it reminded me of my judo days and the stuff that we had done in judo, very, very similar. As some people will say, BJJ, basically just judo, right? So
Right.
that's what some people will say. So I was drawn to it, and but there was nowhere to go. So we literally got the VHS tapes. We got 2 gymnastics mats and taped them together, and we were like trying to teach each other the moves. We'd buy in judo books and any book we could find that shows a armbar or a pin, and trying to teach each other. And we had a couple of guys in the class that wrestled and a couple of guys that did this or that. And we just kept kind of like spearheading it together. And then one day, as I was right before I became a police officer, um, I met a couple of guys that were doing some jujitsu. They had been to like out west, and they had done some. They probably were equivalent to like a white belt with a stripe. And
Right.
we got a little more formal instruction from them. And then as I became a cop, I met a guy by the name of Jimmy Codges. Still friends with him to this day. He's one of the black belts at our school. And he was on a parallel path as me. We were basically doing the same thing. We just didn't know each other. And the cool part is the person that introduced us to each other is the same kid that brought me to judo as a kid.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, Matt Benzie. He's like, "Hey, I got this guy I met. His name's Jim Codges. He's doing the same thing you are. You guys should meet." And he introduced us and trained with us for one night, and I never saw him out again. But we always still friends, but he just like made the connection, which is kind of cool. And then Jimmy and I trained, and we started training together. He was a little bit ahead of me. He kind of knew a little more. And then from there, we started going up to Boston and training at Sit Yatong, Boston, at Mark Delagrati's place with Kenny Florian and Keith Florian. And in the basement, I don't know if you've ever been to Sit Yatong, but in Somerville, but it's old school Rocky Balboa type gym. Like you
Yeah.
park in the street. You got to, if you can find a parking space, you have a little steps that go down to a door that just says Sit Yatong, and you open the door and you go in, and it's just all memorabilia on the walls, and it's got the smell of what you would think it should smell like. And
Right. Right.
it's a lot of fighters and stuff. It's pretty cool. So we started training there, trained there for a while. It's a long way from Connecticut to go there, so we would drive
Right.
up. Sometimes twice a week, sometimes once every other week, just depending on when our schedules matched up with work. And we would train there as often as we could because there was nothing around us. And that was kind of the closest good training. And I got my blue belt and my purple belt through Kenny Florian. And then he got really big into the UFC and, moved out to Los Angeles at the time. And it was kind of impossible to continue to train with him. And I was already at this point a purple belt, and I had a school obviously already. And was kind of like without a teacher for a little bit. And then I met a guy by the name of Keith Owen, and I was just going online. I saw bjjmoves.com, I think it was a video. It was like 2007, maybe 2008. And I was like, "Oh, this guy's pretty good." So I email him and I'm like, "Hey, do you do seminars? I got a school in Connecticut. Do you want to come out?" Literally within 10 minutes, my phone rings. He's like, "Hey, this is Keith Owen. I'm from Boise, Idaho." And I'm like, "Okay." So he's like, we kind of hit it off right away. He had 3 kids. I had 3 kids, all boys, same thing. He was a cop for a while. I'm still a cop at the time. So we pretty much hit it off right away. I'm like, "You want to come out?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So he comes out. We trained a seminar. He comes out several times. And then one day he's like, "Hey, who's your black belt now?" I'm like, "I don't really have one. I'm kind of on my own at this point." So he's like, So I said, "Are you interested?" He's like, "I'm in Idaho, kind of far for you to come see me. You want my coach, you don't want me." And I was like, I always thought that was pretty amazing that he wasn't trying to sell himself. He was trying to,
Right.
give me to his coach. And I'm like, well, how the hell am I going to meet Pedro Sauer? And he's like, well, I'll let you know when I'm going to see him, and you can come with me. So I'm like, all right. So it was a month or two later, and I'm thinking I'm going to get, I don't know, a couple weeks notice or something. Literally
Right.
calls me on like a Thursday afternoon. Hey, I'm going to go see Professor Sauer. Do you want to come? I'm like, yeah, sure. When is it? He says, tomorrow. I'm like, all right, where? He's like, Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh.
I'm like,
Oh, good.
okay. So Jimmy and I get in a car. We drive all the way to Louisville, Kentucky, and we trained with Professor for the weekend. And Andre Galval was there. There was a bunch of people there,
Yep.
and it was really cool training. There was a lot of people. So I'm talking to the person that was in charge of his association at the time, and I'm like, hey, I got this school in Connecticut. I don't know if there's a way that I can become involved with you guys. And he's like, yeah, we're not really taking anybody right now, but thanks for coming down, kind of thing. And so then I'm kind of like, oh man, that sucks. So I'm sitting there, and then Pedro Sauer just comes over to me, starts talking to me. And he's like, hey, my friend, what's your name? Where you from? That kind of thing. And then Keith's like, oh, this is my friend Rob. And so he finds out I'm a cop, and he's like, you're a police officer? I said, yeah. And he said, oh yeah. He says, you're in, no problem. Like, just like that. He's like, I don't care what they said. You can train with us. So I started going down to Virginia whenever I could, training with him. At first like monthly, go down, stay for several days at a time, and then roll with all his people. And I was a purple belt when I first got there, and I'll say about a year and a half, 2 years later, he promoted me to my brown belt, and I've been with him ever since. So I probably started with him in '08 and got all my stripes, my purple, my brown, my black belt, all my degrees of black through him.
That's great. I'm guessing that the person who said, yeah, no, we're not really doing that right now, she's the filter, and then he comes out to kind of
Yeah, well,
talk to people and see what I think of any of these guys. That's
the guy's
cool.
not there anymore. He was there for a long time, but he's not there anymore. But yeah, I don't think it was anything necessarily a negative. I think it was more like you said, that they wanted to make sure they're,
Yeah.
that I wasn't some weirdo. Probably.
They're clearly not just saying yes to anybody who walks in the door.
Correct. Yeah. And then it
Yeah.
was just from there, I stayed pretty in touch with him, and we got along really good, and came to my place many, many times, and I would make a lot of trips. It was tough because up until my black belt, I made a lot of trips down there, and that's a long way to go, but there really was not a lot of choices. So.
Right. It's funny because you're the training in the basement, putting gymnastics mats together and just trying to make it work. There's been so many people I've talked to about who started back, around after that kind of the hoist,
Mhm.
gets everybody's attention moment, who like, we don't have a place to train, but we're going to figure this out. And we're going we're going to get mats, we're going to buy VHS tapes. And it's so many people I talked to from that time frame just were like, it's like the frontier. You have to we're just going to make it work. And that's so cool to hear that yet another story of, well, let's get some mats and let's figure this out until we find somebody.
It was so annoying too, because these mats, they only stuck together vertically.
Yes.
So
Right.
we needed them horizontally together, side by side, and you had to tape them together, and the tape was crappy tape, wouldn't hold me, so you had to keep sticking them, and it was a mess.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That
So
is
that's
so
my
cool.
story of how and then Keith Owen passed away a few years ago. Actually at the Pedro Sauer camp in Brazil. So, which he was a
Wow.
great dude.
Yeah, and it's wild. Just like a cold reach out to him, and he calls you, and the next thing you know, you're in Kentucky. That's
Yeah, well, it was, that was probably, 7 or 8 months later, but still, it's pretty cool.
right.
It was
But I
meant to
mean,
be.
yeah, clearly. So at some point you get involved with law enforcement. And I mentioned at the beginning, you had anybody who does that job, like I did it 23 and change, and I checked about, I didn't want SRO, so I left that for people who were happy to go work with teenagers. That wasn't me. But I checked a bunch of boxes and was able to do a lot of things. So can you just kind of talk through like getting into law enforcement, the path of your career. What are the high points? What are the low points? What stands out? And just take us through that
Yeah, sure. So I was always attracted to law enforcement career. My a lot of my family members were in the military, and I had an interest in that as well. But I was, for whatever reason, I was drawn to the police department as a career. And in high school, we had a program. It was called Project Bridge, when it was with the Connecticut State Police, and you could apply to it. And as a senior, you could leave school early and then go down to the troop and spend time there a couple times a week. And they started off, you sit in dispatch, and then you get to go on the road with the troopers and ride the car. And I would work out with some of them as once they got to know me and stuff. So I did that program first, and that got me really totally hook, line, and sinker. I wanted to be a police officer. And then from there, I went to community college, and then went to 4-year college, Eastern Connecticut State University, and all along the way, I did a bunch of internships with probation, DEA, U.S. Marshals, that kind of stuff, and applied, and I got hired in 1997 as a police officer, and I worked at the West Hartford, Connecticut Police Department for 20 years. And it's about 130, 135 police officers right next to the city of Hartford, and in
Yep.
between Hartford and like New Britain. And we were relatively busy for Connecticut. It's a pretty busy police department. We would run anywhere between 16 to 70,000 calls a year, ran about 10 patrol districts, and then 2 to 3 bosses on the road, traffic cars, street crimes, detectives. So it was relatively busy. Um, and I loved every minute of it. I thought it was the greatest job. Um, we had the greatest agency at the time. I can't speak for what it's like anymore. I'm not there anymore, and things change over time, but they were always known as a leader in our area of Connecticut, when it came to training, when it came to evolving as a police force, and they were, I thought, amazing place to work. And that's kind of how it got me into policing. And through that career, I got to work I did patrol, I did street crime unit, I did traffic division, I did became a detective about 9 years on. And the first probably 5 years as a detective, I worked normal detective cases, whether that was your typical frauds or burglaries or robberies or occasional murders that we would get, sexual assault, stuff like that. And then right around 2012, I got into our special investigations division, which was our vice narcotics and stuff like that. And I'd already done quite a bit of that with them in the street crime unit, 'cause the two units kind of worked together at the time. So I got into that and finished my career doing that. Um, and then we had a part-time SWAT team. I got on the SWAT team in 1999. I got hired in 97, got on the team in 99, and stayed on for 18 years and never missed I never missed one call out in the entire 18 years I was on the team.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
we started the Connecticut SWAT Challenge, if you've ever heard of it. So our team started that, and still to this day, the same guys run it. And it grew out of a tragedy in Connecticut, basically, where a police officer was killed, and the SWAT Challenge kind of grew out of that. And the teams, we have 40 teams every year now that come to compete in that. It's, I think, either the
Wow.
largest or second largest tactical event in the country.
That's great.
Yep.
Very cool. That's funny. You started in 97. I started in 98. So it's
Yeah.
same, probably this. I mean, Burlington, Vermont is a much different experience than anywhere in Connecticut, I'm sure. But
I
it's,
don't care where you're a cop. You're a cop long enough, you're going to see things that no one should see.
yeah,
And
that is, yeah.
I did, after I did my 20 years there, I did 5 more years outside of West Hartford after I retired. I did 5 more years in we have like in our Connecticut State Police system, they have towns that aren't big enough to have their own police department, but they're too small to rely on the state police. So they
Right.
have constables or police officers. They're police officers, but they work under the troop. And I did that for 5 years. And I did game warden for a
Interesting.
while too, about a year.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's where I did some SRO work, because one of the schools in one of the towns that I was working, um, they needed an SRO for like a period of time while they were looking for one. And I didn't really want to do it for too long, but I did it to fill in. So.
Yep.
And actually, I learned a lot doing it. It was it was kind of way out of my comfort zone, because I mean, I was, very different career path than that for me. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was an eye opener for me in some ways. Dealing with the administrations, the kids were
Yeah.
great. The kids were
Yeah.
zero problem. It was
See, I
the
think I think the administration and the parents would be
Yep,
the struggle.
yeah, the kids were never a problem.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
So if my math is correct, you started jujitsu before, well, and martial arts obviously anyway, but you started jujitsu pretty significantly before, if that's an accurate description, before you got into policing. And I'm wondering, like, I remember for most of my career, because I didn't start training until I was almost retired, and I wishing I had started years before. I knew about it, I just for whatever reason didn't. But I think back to all of the, the MDTS and all of the, like, the armbar takedown and the, distractionary strike, all of the stuff that we learned over the years. And I look back and go, man, I wish I knew, I wish I knew then what I know now. Right. So I'm wondering, as somebody who had that perspective coming into law enforcement, was that an obvious thing that you immediately realized, like, what they're teaching us is not necessarily great?
Yeah, well, you gotta remember, I was training before I started becoming a police officer, in jiu-jitsu, but I was probably equivalent to, like, a couple stripes on a white belt, you know? But back then, if you had 2 stripes on a white belt,
Right.
you were a significant force compared to most normal people, right? So,
Right.
when I went to the police academy, I went into the academy with this vision of, like, "This is gonna be amazing, the training's gonna be awesome, I can't wait, I like to push myself," kinda thing, and I couldn't have been more disappointed ever in my life than when I went through
Right.
that police academy. I just thought it was, checking boxes, that's all it was. It was any of the stuff they showed us and the defensive I was respectful, I didn't say anything, just a new guy, and, my instructors and my, family members, they're like, "Listen, just go there, shut your mouth, do what they tell you to do. If it's not illegal, if it's not immoral, and if it's not totally unsafe, do what they tell you to do." And that's what I did. I shut my mouth. I did what I was supposed to do. If they tell you to stand on your head, you stand on your head. That's the game. And I knew though that my kind of long-term goal was, what can I do to change this, basically.
Right.
The training was, what you would expect it to be back then. Someone's going to punch at you. You're going to grab the punch out of the air and twist their wrist, and they're going to go to the ground. You're going to push the pressure point behind their ear, and all these nonsensical things that I don't think anyone's ever really done. Um, and the instructors at the time, they were kind of what we refer to as Jurassic narcs. They were long retired. They hadn't been on the road in a very long time, and they were teaching, courses that they got a certificate in for 5 days, and they didn't live the lifestyle. And it was pretty
Right.
evident, So that was, yeah, that was my understanding of it pretty quickly.
And the more you, then obviously the further you get in your career, you're still training and you're
Sure.
growing and you're seeing more, and that kind of divide got bigger, I'm assuming, where you're seeing what's coming out of the academy is not necessarily really helping us compared to what, like, the knowledge base that you had at that point.
Correct. So I was probably, once I got on the job and I was out of the academy and on the road, it wasn't long. We were in a pretty busy area. It wasn't long before you're putting your hands on people. And,
Yeah.
especially in a lot of the units I was in over the years, it was a daily occurrence. So as I worked and I wasn't a person that would go to work and say, "Oh, I trained," put my hand up
Right.
like, you know, not to make fun of the CrossFitters, but I wasn't like, "Hey, I do CrossFit," just, I wasn't like that, right? So I
Right.
just kind of shut my mouth and went to work. And it wasn't too long before we would have incidents. And then after the incident, the sergeant would be like, "Hey, what the hell was that?" You know what I mean? Like, you you kind of wrapped the guy up, took him down, and you had his hands behind his back kind of quick, like, what are they showing at the academy these days, kind of thing. And I'm like, "Well, no, I didn't learn that there. What are you doing?" And I got called in. I'll never forget. I got called into the supervisor's office. It was like the third time in like a month that I had subdued somebody kind of quickly. And again, these people weren't difficult to subdue. There was, someone trying to run away from a shoplifting, or, this is not
Right.
like, the end all be all of takedowns, but to them, it was, wow, no one does this. We usually are hitting people with flashlights and, whatever we need to do to get them down, right? So
Modified impact weapons.
yeah, exactly. I got called into the supervisor's office, and it was a third shift, and the sergeant's name was Tony Mealy, and still know him to this day. And older Italian guy. Every time he would get mad, he had this vein in his neck that would pop out. Pretty jacked guy, and he was intimidating to go in and talk to. And I remember going into the office, and I'm like, they called me on the radio. They're like, "Hey, District 12 wants to see." 12 was our like inside boss. They want to see you. So I'm like, all right. So I go in, and we had just had a situation like an EDP out of control, trying to run from the ambulance people. We had to take them down. So I get called in. I'm like, oh shit, what I do? So I get in there, and he's staring at his computer, and he's not the screen. He's not looking at me. So he's looking straight ahead. He's got glasses, and he's looking at the screen, but he's talking to me, and he's like, "Officer, what happened out there?" In a really strict voice. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm like, the last call. He's like, yeah. So I tell him, person tried to run, I kind of wrapped them around their hips. I brought them down to the ground. They turtled up. I pried their arm out, put it behind their back like a bar hammer lock. And he's like, all right. He's like, it's clear. It's just like the third or fourth time that one of the sergeants has come in and said, hey, this kid knows something that the rest of us don't. And what are you doing? So he actually brought me into a room. He took his gun belt off, and we had some mats there. He said, show me some of the stuff. So I literally showed him. And from that night forward, he would have me come in towards the early morning hours when things quieted down, and he would bring people off the road, and he would have me show them. And I
That's
wasn't a
awesome.
certified instructor, nothing. So it got back to the training division. After like a couple of weeks, people are talking about it. It gets back to the training division, and the boss there is like, well, hey, no, this kid's not certified as an instructor, right? So the chief's office finds out about it, and our chief, Jim Strelacci, he was a wrestler his entire life and very good wrestler. So he hears about it, and he's like, send him to the class so he can get certified. So they sent me to the Connecticut Arrest and Control Instructors class at the time, which was better than what the police academy training had been, but it was still a long cry from what it should be. So I get out of that class, and now that I'm certified, they started letting me teach. And I started teaching pretty quickly, about a year and a half on the job, 2 years on the job. And I was teaching all of our people. And we ran an in-service for about 500 officers a year, because it wasn't just our police department. We were kind of a training hub for all the local agencies in that region of the state. So everybody
Right.
came to us for in-service. So I would teach, 500 cops a year. And it was pretty cool.
Did they let you have some leeway and like, this is what you went and got certified in, but also show people the stuff that you're doing that works? Were you able to mix the two, or?
You passed the class, right? Yes. Okay, do whatever you want.
Perfect.
So I literally did whatever they did never. And I taught in service from 99 to 2010. Then I took a break for like a year because I was ready to kill people. And then just because in service is tough, as you know, right?
Yep.
And then they asked me to come back. So I said, all right, I had a little breather, and then I did it the rest of my career. So I did it like 16, 17 years of my career. I did in service. And in all of that time, they never told me what to teach.
Oh, that's good.
They told me whatever they said. And they were very, very good about, if someone has a background in something and someone is skilled in something, then we're going to trust our people because they know and I don't, basically. Like if you are an electrician, why is the chief going to tell you how to be an electrician?
Right.
Right? You already know that. We hired you because you have a skill. Show us your skill. That makes sense. Now teach everybody else. That's kind of their mentality.
That's kind of refreshing to hear, because
And very rare, by the way. You don't see that.
Yeah, I don't know that. I was gonna say, I don't. That's not a common trait that,
No,
that I've
not.
experienced.
And I know that.
Huh.
I was very lucky.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into teaching. And then from there, the state of Connecticut had kind of a lockdown on a specific system being taught in the state for a very long time. And you couldn't teach outside. You could teach in your police department, but you couldn't like teach anywhere else unless you fell under the flag of that program. So when I went through that program, they give you an evaluation form at the end, and I filled it out as honestly as I could. I'm like, listen, this was better than the academy training, but there's no clinch work. There's no there's no ground stuff. There's no there's no positional holds, positional control. There's no none of that. I'm not a fan of some of the things they were doing, and I explained why. And to the credit of the person running the program, who was a higher ranking officer in another nearby agency, they called me up and they're like, "Hey, can you come to my office and talk about this?" So I went down and they're like, "Hey, we don't ever really get negative complaints." And I'm like, "Well, it's not a complaint. I'm just telling you what my, 2 cents are." And I had my school already up and running. So we agreed to disagree in the moment. He's like, "I don't think cops should fight on the ground. Cops shouldn't be fighting on the ground. We should be fighting on our feet." And I said, "Well, I agree with that, but there's this thing," and Keith Owen would always say this, "there's this thing called gravity that doesn't give a shit." You know what I mean? and
Yeah.
and we're bipedal creatures. We can slip, trip, fall, be overpowered to our back, be surprised, and you can end up on the ground relatively quickly against your will. And if you don't know how to manipulate that environment, how to position your body, how to find the angles, how to get underhooks to get back to your feet, how to control punches from coming down on your head. Like if you don't understand that environment, you're going to drown. You're
Right.
basically essentially a lifeguard that can't swim. You think you can, but you can't. And it's going to be an eye opener for people when that happens. So I said, "Come to my school." I got a school in Manchester, and come on down and train with us. So he came down. He trained for a Sunday, like a couple hours. Had a lot of other martial arts background, but never had done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and found out the same thing that everyone does when they do Jiu-Jitsu. The same exact result occurred to him that does to everyone. And then it was another meeting after that. He's like, "Hey, you changed my mind, basically." So then from that point forward, I taught a ground fighting class in Connecticut um, every year moving forward. And that's kind of how we got that running. And back then, I started I called it the Officer Survival Series. And it was never meant to be a course. It was just, I got my jujitsu school. I want to get people to come in and do jujitsu that are cops. So I would put out these like 4 or 5 times a year, "Hey, free seminar, come down. It's hour and a half, 2 hours of training." And then they would just come and we would teach them jujitsu and try to, blend it to where it works for the job a little bit. And that's how I developed a lot of my student base, was doing things like that. But it never was intended to become a full course down the road. It was more
Right.
or less just to get people in the door to do jujitsu.
So that's a good segue into kind of how that evolved into what it is now. So can you, for people who haven't heard of Officer Survival Series, can you kind of explain what that is, what it's become, and how you got there?
Yeah, sure. So I started running all those police courses, and I did them not only under this other program for many years. And I got to a point where I was just having a hard time where these people are coming to the class, they're being taught, and then they're leaving 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days later, whatever it is, depending on the course, and they're issued an instructor certification. And they're now able to go back to their police department and teach a bunch of people who are going to be trusting them to teach them, you know, effectively, right? And
Right.
I just was looking at it and I got to a point where I'm like, I just can't, I don't feel right signing off on some of these people. So there was different people involved in this program, and I basically started to have like kind of butting of the heads with this. I'm like, "Hey, my ground fighting program could be so much more, because they only really used me for the ground portion, and all the stand-up stuff was done the way they always did it." And I expressed my, disbelief in some of the takedowns they were teaching and stuff like that. And it just got to a point where I split ways. Even knowing that I wouldn't be able to teach beyond my own police department or beyond my jiu-jitsu school, because they
Right.
had basically a policy in the state of Connecticut that this was the only system could be utilized. So I walked away from it basically in probably 2016, I would say. And at that point forward, I just kept training people on my own. And a lot of police departments would still send their people to me, even though um, you know uh, my program wasn't fully post certified at the time. And then we started to test the system where we're going to challenge it. Say, hey, why is this the only thing that can be taught? Why can't something else be taught? So I started collecting body cam footage because now we got camera proof. And
Right.
all the people that train with us, we had dozens and dozens and dozens of videos of body lock takedowns, of rear clench takedowns, of prying arms out, of kimuras, of all these different 2-on-1s, all these different things that we teach in our classes being utilized by police officers under pressure in the street. And it looks exactly how we do it in training, and it works, and it fits all the use of force policies and procedures. And we started collecting all that data, and I put together an entire presentation, included everything in it that I thought was important for a use of force program. I submitted it to the state, fully expecting to get a denial stamp back. Um, and About 6 weeks went by. I thought they probably filed it in the garbage, quite honestly, by that point. And I got an email, approved. So from that
That's
point
awesome.
forward, I started running the course. And the course, the way I designed the course is it's 8 days long, but the course is only to shine a light on various areas of use of force to show the individual student, hey, you may be good at this part, but are you good at this part? And
Right.
maybe you're good at all. Very few people are, and maybe you're not good at any of it, but we want to prove to you and show you with a little bit of pressure on the mat that you should be taking this seriously. And the course is not is not going to fix your problems. It's going to identify your problems. And then
Right.
after that course, you need to continue to train because it's only training consistently over time that is going to make you better. Going to a class for 8 days is going to make you a little better, but more and more importantly, it's going to identify in you what you need to fix. So the class starts off, we do basic striking more from the perspective of someone trying to hit you and how to clinch and get a hold of them. But I have a belief that if you know how to throw punches and you have a little bit of experience sparring back and forth, you can see the way someone shifts their body, the way their shoulder drops, the way their hand moves, the way their foot pivots. So you already are preparing for that punch before it's even thrown because you have experience doing it. The best way to defend against something is to know how to do it yourself, right? Because that gives you the idea of where the weak points are, right? So we have a striking portion. We spent a ton of time in the clinch. So the clinch is probably the number one position that we teach. In my opinion, the clinch is the most undertrained and most important part of any fight for police officers or for anyone really. That's why I think wrestlers do so well in MMA because they're very used to the clinch, and the clinch is that area of a fight that dictates the path. Like, where are we going from here? If you're very, very good in the clinch, you can keep it on the feet. Or if you're very, very good, very, very good in the clinch, you can take it to the ground. So,
Right.
and I think that it's a decision maker of where this fight is going to go. So we spent a lot of time in the clinch, and we spent a lot of time on vertical barriers, walls, and stuff like that. And then we have takedowns. We do solo takedowns. We do team tactic takedowns with other officers, and then we have ground position work that we work, and then we have edge weapons portion. We have weapon retention portion. So there's a bunch of physical part, right? And then we add in tactical medical. So we have trauma doctors that come in and do tac medical portion of the class because in this use of force engagement, not only could you get hurt, but the suspect could get hurt, or an innocent person could get hurt, or another officer could get hurt. And knowing how to survive that moment is equally as important, if not more important, than surviving the actual assault, right? So
Right.
there's that element of it. So we have the tactical medical element of it. And then we have person come in and talk to them about special needs populations, like how to identify, like, hey, is this person just messing with me to mess with me? Or is there something else going on here that we can see the warning signs? So we have a whole person come in, Sergeant Rutger from Southbridge, Mass PD. His daughter's highly autistic, and he is also a jiu-jitsu guy as well. He's a sergeant up there, and he has done a huge program to educate police officers about autism and how to identify it and how to deal with autistic population and use of force situations. So we have that whole part of the class. We then have scenario-based training where we have role players and we bring in city buses, school buses, we have houses, we have fake blood, the whole 9 yards. We have
Yep.
simulations, we have everything included. And our scenarios are not designed so that every scenario is a shootout. That was a big problem I saw in policing, is that every time I would go to training, every single simulation scenario they sent you on was like SEAL Team 6. And it's like, that's
Yeah.
not reality, you know? So when
Right.
we do our scenarios, there's going to be scenarios that if you say and do the right things, this person's going to come with you. And then there's scenarios where, depending on what you say and do, will greatly depend on what they do. And then there's always going to be those one or two scenarios where it doesn't matter what you say, like they're not coming, right? And you don't know what that's going to be when you walk in there. So the decision making skills under the stress of not knowing what's about to happen and making those decisions under pressure is something that I think is hugely lacking in law enforcement. You can shoot a paper target all day long with 300 score when it's not firing back, when no one's yelling at you, when the rain's not hitting you in the face, whatever the situation is,
Yeah.
when you're not under any kind of duress, or is this the right moment? And that's one thing that we try to get pie to people is like, listen, you can perform all these moves on the mat perfectly, but that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is the time that you do it is the right time. So the decision to do the move is important, right? And you don't get that unless you have scenario based training. So we have that element of it. And then we have attorneys that watch these unfold. They're recorded. And then we can't have everyone in the class testify because there's just too many people. But we take a group of these people. They have to write reports about their force that they used. And then on the last day of the course, there's a huge auditorium. There's a big screen, massive screen. They get their video shown, and actual police litigation attorneys that try cases in Connecticut put them on the stand. And they have to testify to the force they used or didn't use, or whatever it is they did or didn't do. And they get both direct and cross examined.
That's
So
awesome.
just like you have to feel the pressure of somebody mounting you, or someone trying to rip your gun off your belt, or putting a tourniquet on under stress, or making a decision to shoot or not shoot in a school bus, you should feel the pressure of a trained attorney that knows all the answers hammering you on that stand. Because I have had to testify several times. I've testified on use of force. I've testified in federal court use of force, and I know it's miserable, and
Yep.
it's I don't think too many people realize how terrible it really is. So
It is
understanding what
terrible.
that feels like, I wanted them to feel that and experience that. So we have that element of the course as well. We have there's a whole nother tier where we bring in canine units and they have to do like team tactics with the dogs, and we bring in medics to teach about chemical restraint, soft restraints. We have our entire inspector general's office, which is the very agency that decides if a police officer's use of force, deadly use of force, is justified in Connecticut. They are part of the course. They have cleared the whole course, especially the up close shooting stuff that we do. We have Elliot Spector's office, which is uh, Elliot Spector is the guy who literally writes the field manual for every police officer in Connecticut, the book that they have to go through to decide if, what charges to do. He's the person that writes the book, and he's a defense lawyer for police officers. So his team of lawyers are part of this course as well. I've got doctors from Yale, Harvard, and UConn Health on the staff. So we have an extensive, it's not just me. Like, I bring in
Right.
all the instructors
Right.
are black belts in jiu-jitsu and have extensive police training and experience. And then what we do is we evaluate all these people through the course. So we'll have, like, the last class, we had 50 people in the class, 8 left with a certificate to instruct.
That's
So yeah,
that's impressive.
and the class sells out every time because people say, well, are they going to keep sending people if they don't get certified? They know before they get there. Because if you tell me, I tell the agencies, do not send me your favorite child.
Right.
Send me the person that deserves to be the instructor. Send me the person that trains on their own, that already understands the language. I'm going to just give them a slightly different dialect to the same language they already know, and we're going to apply it to the profession of being a police officer. Okay. But if you send me someone that can't shrimp, that doesn't know how to throw a punch at all, that can't break, fall, and stand up in base, that can't, if I say get in the mount, they get in side control. Like, you don't send me that person. Now you can send me that person and we'll help them and they'll get a lot better, but we're not making them an instructor. Okay.
Right.
They have to prove to us on the mat over the 8 days under stress and under pressure, that they know what they know. And if they can't do that, we're not passing them. Okay. Because it is a fallacy to take someone for that amount of time with zero training and then send them back to a police department. And now they are then a year later told by their sergeant, "Oh, you went to that class, right? Why don't you teach in service next Wednesday?" And then they show up the night before with a napkin from Dunkin' Donuts with their I've literally seen this with the lesson plan written on the back that morning, right? And they show up and they bastardize every move they learned, the year before. And the people in the class that don't know any better just follow suit because they don't know what they don't know. And the one or two in the class that train, that grew up training and know, are like, this person knows nothing. And they write them
And then
off.
they call you.
They write them off. And then that gets handed down that way. So I had a chief not too long ago. He's like, "Hey, Rob," he's like, "I would send somebody to your class, but they won't come back certified." And I said, "Well, if you send me the right person, they will, right? And what I'll do is if you send me a person that's just not ready, I give them 6 months of free jujitsu at my school after the class. So
Wow.
they can get done with the class. They can come to my school for 6 months free of charge. They can train twice a day, 7 days a week if they want to. And when they get to a point that I feel that, hey, you're good enough to teach, then I just upgrade their certificate. I don't charge them again. So I want qualified, not certified.
Yep.
Best way I can put it.
That's awesome. That
Yeah, and it was funny
it's
because this particular person, his kid does jujitsu at a different school somewhere else, away from where I am. And I said to him, I said, "Hey, when you brought, Jimmy, whatever his kid's name is, to jujitsu, what did you look for?" He's like, "Oh, well, the place was nice. The mats were clean. The schedule was great. The guy was charismatic. I liked the coach. He was real personable, all that kind of stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, it's close to our house. Okay, okay. What belt is he?" "Oh, he's a black belt." I said, "Okay. And how much is it a month?" He's like, "Oh, 150 or 160, whatever it was." I said, "Okay, so would you bring little Jimmy to this school if he told you after touring the place and seeing how beautiful it was, schedule fits, but he tells you, 'Hey, I'm a two-stripe white belt.' Would you pay him $150 a month to teach your 6-year-old jujitsu?" And he's like, "Well, no, I want a black belt to teach my kid." And I'm like, "Oh, you want a black belt to teach your kid, but you'll let someone less qualified than the two-stripe white belt that went through a 5-day course teach your cops? How does that make any sense at all? And your kid's probably not going to get into a life and death situation. Your cops are guaranteed to get into a situation."
right.
So I said, and he's like, "Oh man, that's hard to argue." So he sent his people.
Good. It's crazy to me that the state, like, you had to kind of step up and build this program like on your own. I mean, I'm glad the state embraced it and approved it and all that, but it's crazy to me that the state doesn't, like, and it's not just your state, like every state has this
Mhm.
issue, but it's crazy to me that people like you and there's other groups out there doing similar stuff, but it takes you guys doing this. It's the states aren't doing it on their, or the agencies aren't doing it on their own.
No, and I kind of understand to some degree. I understand why, because here's the thing. I'll just take my own agency that I came from for 20 years. We were pretty progressive with training, but imagine taking 130 cops and rotating them through training twice a week, off the road on duty. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible. There are places that I believe do it. I believe Mesa, Arizona does it. I believe Jacksonville, Florida does it. I think there are places, Pittsfield, Mass, I want to say, Avon, Connecticut has done a lot of training with their cops. There are places that can do it, but I think that it has to be an investment and it's not cheap and it's not
Right.
easy and they have to have the right people. And I've seen people say, the only way it's ever going to change is if it's mandated, like by the government. Like, hey,
Yeah.
Trump puts in an executive order or whoever's president, hey, every cop needs to train and they have to have X number of hours a week. That could potentially change it, but it could also make it worse because what is that training going to look like? Are they just going to
Right.
rubber stamp people and say,
Right.
"Oh yeah, we gave them 2 hours training," and they don't never feel any pressure. They never go live. They just go through the movements. I don't know what that would look like. That has to be really
Yeah.
watched by people that know how to train. And that was the other thing that's kind of sold this to our state is I was like, listen, when you have these other people that, how long you been training?
4 years, just over
4
4
years.
years.
Okay, so in 4 years of training, I'm pretty confident that if you sit on the edge of the mat and just watch two people roll, two, let's say a white belt that's new, like 3-4 months, and maybe a high blue belt, and you're watching this match, I bet you with your 4 years training that as you watch this match, you will see potential problems as before they happen. you will see the person, the white belt, about to get triangled, or about to get ankle locked, or
Yep.
about to get arm barred. 3, 4, 5 seconds before they even realize it, right? Because you kind of know the path a little bit and you've been around long enough to understand, oh, don't put your hand there. Don't turn your back like that. Don't don't put your hips like that, because you have had it happen to you enough times that you recognize the danger, right? No
Yep.
different than a rookie police officer that doesn't understand the street and doesn't understand the neighborhood, not see what a seasoned police officer
Right.
sees happening on the same street, because
Yeah.
they
It's reps.
it's reps. Exactly. So I said, when you have the instructors that are just paper tigers, or as Chad Lyman says, zoo lions, like you have those kind of instructors, they don't know anything. They just have a piece of paper that says they do, right? So when
Right.
they're watching people train, that's why people get hurt, because the instructors aren't really skilled and they don't know what they're seeing or not seeing, and people get injured. And when you have a really well-trained, you have a black belt in jiu-jitsu running the class, the likelihood of someone getting injured drops drastically,
Yep.
because as they're watching people, they're like, hey, whoa, stop. What are you doing? They can already see this. They can see the car accident before the car accident happens, and they
Yep.
stop it. Whereas when you don't have that same training mentality, you don't know that there's danger,
Right.
you know?
One of the other, so I should have said this at the beginning, but you were on my list of people to have on here at some point. And then I think I told you this when we talked on the phone a while back, but two people whose opinions I think very highly of. One is my instructor, Sergio Caldieri, who's been down to, he just was in, I think, the last class. And Joey Carta, who's a black belt in Connecticut that I know from Globetrotters camps. Both of them were like, you got to have Rob on. And again, I take their opinions very, I hold them in very high regard. So Sergio was telling me there's a portion of the course, and correct me if I'm not right on this, but I believe like you have an actual therapist come in and talk about EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and like the whole trauma side of like the law, of law enforcement and all of that. That's an actual thing that you have an EMDR therapist come in?
That's correct.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah. And by the way, Joey Carta was training with us today. So we did a
I
whole
love
thing
that.
today. We have Connecticut Police Jiu-Jitsu team. We just started, and we had 50 cops in the mat for 2 hours today, and Joey was there.
I love
So
that Joey is back on the mat.
he's
And
an amazing human being.
yes,
Love
he
him.
is. Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yes, we have a therapist. Her name is Dr. Robin Grant Hall. She initially did most of her early work as a psychologist with survivors of satanic cults,
Oh, wow.
which is kind of interesting. And then from there, she moved into first responders and law enforcement, particularly right at 9/11, not 9/11, Sandy Hook in Connecticut.
Yep.
So she was heavily involved in helping all the troopers and officers through that situation. And I met her. I was not there, but friends of mine were. And one of the doctors that's part of our program, Dr. Rich Kamen from UConn Health Center, he was present at Sandy Hook. He's on the FBI tactical team and several tactical teams as a tech trauma surgeon. And he met her and other people in her profession through that circumstance. And I have known Doc Kamen for a very, very long time. That's why the tech medical portion is in our class, because of him. And I was coming through my career, I was always the guy that's like, yeah, others might need that, but I don't need that, right? I'm good. I'm good.
Yep.
And I like every police officer, I've seen fatal car accidents, I've seen murder victims, I've seen, tragic things, right? And sometimes you might go a few days without seeing something, and sometimes you get multiple in a row. But at the end of the day, it's consistency in the wrong way over time of you seeing all these things, hearing all these things, um, relating some of these things to people maybe in your own life, and it starts to build, and you start to have a pressure gauge, basically, that's the pressure is building and building and building inside of you. There's only so much you can put in the cup before the lid pops, right? And I always was like, you know what? I would go to all the um we had these what do you call it? after a critical incident, they would have
Debriefs, yeah.
debrief, yeah, and they would have a psychologist there, and you had to go. You had to go, and you had
Yep.
to sit there. So of course, I would sit there, arms folded, and there'd be whoever was at the call is in the room, and the psychologist would go around and talk to everybody, and I would be respectful. I would listen. That was it. But I never felt it was something that I personally needed. That's not for me. It's for other people, basically. And I remember one day, the psychologist, I had like 4 or 5 in a row. And he's like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" So as everybody was leaving, I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" He's like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Why?" Yeah, I'm fine. Why? He's like, "Well, you're at all of these. You're like the only guy at all of these, right?" He's like, "You either have the worst luck in the world or, I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, I just, I was always kind of known for that as a cop. I just happened to be there. I was one of those guys that something was happening. I was there." Um, and I was like, "No, doc, I'm cool." And he's like, "Yeah, but someday you won't be." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever," and I didn't think nothing of it. And then I met actually Dr. Robin Grant Hall at an in-service program when I was just getting ready to retire. And she went through her whole thing, EMDR, explains it all. And I actually went up to her, talked to her at the end of the class. And I was like, "Oh, I'm glad you're doing this for people. I can see where some people might need this." And she's like, "Some?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." And I just didn't think I needed it, right?
Right.
And I retire, and from there, and I go into my other career field, my other policing jobs after that. And as the years went by, um, and I got a little bit older, and I started reflecting back on my career, and my kids got older, and I don't know, just something changed with me. And I had a couple of tragedies in my own life with very close friends of mine, um, that I started to see things a little differently. And I had a very, very close student of mine that was a student of mine since he was 9 years old. And it was the only person that ever went all the way through the kids' ranks and all the way through the adult ranks and got his black belt. And he
Wow.
was a first responder, and he took his own life.
Oh,
And after some serious things that he had witnessed as a first responder. And he was very young. He was only 22, 23. And that devastated me.
yep.
And within within a day, I was not okay. I was I was not okay. And I look at it like this. I say, in your career, at least for me, I describe it like this. I was on a train going 1,000 miles an hour. All my jobs, my career, my SWAT call outs, overtime, cases, running my schools, kids, wife, house, all this stuff happening. But you're on a train going 1,000 miles an hour. All the relationships you built at work, etc. All the things you're seeing, but you don't have time to think about them because you're going so fast. And then one day, the train doesn't even stop. The door just opens and you're ejected.
Yep.
You either retire by choice or, hey, it's time for you to go sometimes, right? But for me, it was a choice. Hey, time to leave, right? And I'm gonna collect my pension. And when you tumble off of that train and you land up at the foot of the tracks, the train continues to go, and everyone that you knew is still on the train,
Yep.
and they get dropped off at different locations, and your connection to them is somewhat severed. And now you start to think of all the things you've been through and all the things you've done and all the relationships you've had and all the scenes you've been to. And then when you have a thing like I did with my friend, Jack, that's kind of like the lid pops off.
Yep.
And that's when I realized, hey, we do all this training for, self-defense and for TAC medical and all this stuff, but I don't want cops just to survive the punch thrown at their head. I don't want them just to
Right.
survive someone trying to rip a gun off their belt. I don't want them just to survive putting a tourniquet on. I don't want them just to survive courtroom testimony. I want them to survive when this is all said and done and they have to live with this for the rest of their life. That I want them to survive then too. So that's when I contacted Dr. Robin Grant Hall. I said, "Hey, remember me?" She goes, "Oh yeah, the naysayer." Well, like, hey, you know, um, I think maybe you got something here. So I started working with her. I did the EMDR, and am I going to sit here and say, "Oh, it changed my life forever"? I think it was a massive help. I think talking to her was a massive help. I think being open with the things I was feeling was a major help. Things that maybe are tough to tell people that you know better, but they're easier to tell someone that you don't know all that well, I guess, or in that environment. Um, and I saw what it did for me, and then I wanted to make sure others knew about it. So
Yep.
we put it in the class.
That's very much the reason that I talk about it on the show, is because I was in that dark place, and starting EMDR with the right therapist and starting jujitsu around the same time was my formula. Like, that is what got me out. And like, it was very helpful for me. But there's still work. Like, this year has been a giant kick in the balls so far, with just a lot of others, like a lot of stuff. And so I'm finding I'm not as resilient as I thought I was. So I'm like having to kind of step back and do some work. And but having the awareness that I have, having come through that, is huge, because I can recognize, okay, I'm starting to, the clouds are starting to form, so I need to do some work. And that was EMDR for me, was a game changer. And I tell people, like, it feels like voodoo magic, because they're just waving their fingers, or you got the light bar, the paddles, whatever it is, and it's like, this shouldn't work, but I don't. I found it
Yeah, I
very
was having a
effective.
problem where I was getting stuck on a thought. Like
Yep.
like basically it's like right there and I just can't get rid of it. No matter
Yep.
what I do, I can't get rid of it. And I had all these anniversaries of tragedies
Yep.
that I had collected through my career. And a
Right.
lot of them were coming up on like 10-year or 20-year anniversaries where, this person was killed or that person was killed. And some of them were cops. And, it's one of those things where you don't remember you don't always remember the ones you saved. You remember the ones that haunt you are the ones you couldn't, right?
Right.
And that's the thing that would get stuck in my head. And that helped me. I mean, I don't know how it works. I'm not a therapist. I just know that, for me, they have you hold two buzzers, and
Yep.
as she talks to you or whoever your therapist is talks to you, you respond back, and it's going left side, right side, that's to the sides of your brain, and one side of your brain controls a certain thought pattern, and the other side of your brain controls a certain thought pattern, and that process unhinges some of those things that are stuck in your head. That's the way I understand it. But again,
Yep.
I'm not a professional in that area. I just know it helped me, and I wanted to
Right.
make sure others knew about it. And what's interesting is, like, every class that we've ran this, and we've done this now with her probably the last 3 years, and we'll have 40 to 50 people in a class, and she keeps track of how many contact her afterwards, and we're running like 15 to 20.
That's great.
15 to 20 people per class are reaching out to her after the class within a week. And
That's
sometimes
great.
they're
I
further
remember.
away from her and then she has to like send them to someone else, but
Right.
that's kind of crazy.
I remember when Sergio got back from the class. The next time I saw him at our class, and he was like, there was a block on EMDR, because he knows my story. He's heard it a
Yep.
million times, but he was like, there's a block on EMDR. And I was like, what? That's amazing. Like, that is, like, I look at that, like, that is so forward thinking. And there's agencies, again, this is something, departments, and there's some that are really ahead of this, but like, that is so forward thinking, to just like, hey, it's not just about, like you said, protecting yourself from getting punched in the face. It's about all that other stuff that comes down the road, that, you know, we
Yep.
all are like, oh, I'm good. And I thought I was good until I wasn't. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's been really, really great. And she's an amazing person. And, every single person that then goes to talk to her, will actually, most of them will come back to me that know me well and be like, hey, the class, that woman, thank you. Like,
yep.
thank you.
Yeah.
So,
That can be life changing, for sure.
yep.
Life saving. Um, so for cops who have access to training
Mhm.
and don't take advantage of it, what is your message? Like, and I know obviously you can't get everybody to drink from the fountain, but what is your pitch to try to get people who don't train, that are still on the job, to start training?
Okay. So, a couple things here. first and foremost, can I just go back real quick to the
Yeah,
EMDR for 1 second? So one thing
sure.
that people say is like jujitsu helps them mental health wise. Like they get on the mat, they train, they kind of forget about their problems, right? That kind of thing
I
for those
say that.
a couple of hours. And I totally believe that it has that effect. Your dopamine's being released, like you're happy, you're among, peers, that kind of thing. I get that. But for me, I've been training my whole life. I did 15 classes last week, right? Like I train constantly. And yes, while I'm on the mat, that focus is there. But I do also, I don't want to be a naysayer, but I think that that's a temporary fix. Like
Yeah.
if you really have a
Oh, for
struggle,
sure.
there needs to be professionals outside of that realm that can help you. Jiu-jitsu can help you,
Absolutely.
but I mean, it's just a temporary band-aid, you know?
Well,
Uh,
I look at it like it's a tool or a practice that supports that work that you're the professionals getting in there and doing stuff work.
100%.
It
Yep.
supports all of that. For yeah, it's definitely not a stand on its own mental health
Correct.
treatment.
So now you said, going back to cops that have access to training and that they're not training, and what do I think about it? So there's a few things. Like there's a lot of guys that are really into jujitsu. They love jujitsu. They want to train jujitsu all the time, and they're cops. And why aren't people training? And then my answer to them is, when's the last time you went shooting? When's the
Yep.
last time you did emergency driving? When's the last time you did, applied a tourniquet or did CPR training? When's the last time you did, entries with a rifle
Right.
and, rifle combatives and stuff like that? When's the last time you did any of these things? And they're like, well, no, what we do it, okay, well, just like you probably don't want to go do CPR every day, there's probably cops that don't want to do this, right? Now, do I agree
Right.
with that? I don't, but I'm saying that it's easy to do what you love, right? It isn't so easy to do the things you don't want to do. And you see
Yep.
that in jujitsu. You see people come to jujitsu class and they fall in love with a specific part of jujitsu. They fall in love with the gi, or they fall in love with no gi, or they fall in love with the leg lock game, or they hate takedowns, or they love takedowns, right? You see people, oh, I'm going to be a sport guy. I want to do tournaments, and oh, I want to be MMA person, or I want to do self defense, and they all have their little piece of the pie that they focus on. And that same thing happens in police work. Like people get
Right.
pigeonholed. Like, oh, I'm just a detective. I don't need to do that. I just process scenes or I interview people. Or whatever their reason is. But at the end of the day, I tell them this: listen, every police job application I've ever read, where it has the description of the job, states in there that you may have to respond to violence. You may have to respond to an emergency, and you may have to control another human being. You may have to put your hands on somebody, and you may have to use deadly force. Okay. It's deadly force could be used against you. Okay. And you have to be willing to be prepared for that. Not one person that I would hire people as police officers. I would do backgrounds on people as police officers over the years and do the interview process with them. And I never once saw a applicant with a gun to their head and someone forcing them to become a cop. It was
Yep.
a personal choice. They wanted the badge, they wanted the job, they wanted to raise their hand and say, "Send me." Okay? Well, if that's what you wanna do, then you need to do the things that are required of that profession, right? And I think that I think it was at the Invictus seminar in Boston a few weeks back, and I forget who said this, but it was a really great point. They're like, "Imagine you're in the fight of your life, okay? And you're like, "Oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna make it out of this one," right? And you're fighting, it's getting real bad. You're calling for help, and by the grace of God or whatever it is you believe in or don't believe in beyond this, here comes a police car. That police car pulls in. You're like, thank goodness they're here, right? And the door opens, and as the person approaches, it's another one of yourself. It's you.
Right.
Are you okay with that?
Right.
Do you say yes or do you say, oh shit? Right? So I think most cops know when they are true to themselves, they really think in their heart and know, they know if if they're capable and they know if they're not. And if someone else's family is calling, let's say you're working and someone where you back where you live, your own family is in need of 911 and they're calling 911 for someone to come help them. Who do you want showing up? Do you want the
Right.
person who barely made it through the academy, the person that's out of shape, the person that has to be um, severely assisted to pass their firearms qualification, the person that has zero physicality, the person that is afraid of their own shadow? Do you want that person, or do you showing up to help your spouse, your children,
Right.
in a time of need, or do you want a person that is well trained, that is, you know, not afraid to get in there and do what they got to do, and they prepare for that on a daily basis? Who do you want?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that anyone honest with themselves knows that truth. The problem
Yeah.
is we have a culture in law enforcement that, you know, doesn't support that. You know, the culture of law enforcement is, yeah, it won't happen to me. I'll be okay.
Right.
I got backup. I got a
I've done
taser.
okay so far.
Yeah, I got a taser. I got this. I got that. And I got to, I'll shoot him. You got the guy. I'll shoot him guy, right? You always got that
Right.
guy. And I always tell people when we do the firearms retention, I'm like, listen, everybody thinks the gun is there to protect you, but at the end of the day, the only way the gun can protect you is if you protect the gun.
Right.
And the only way you can protect the gun is if you're physical and you know how to, put your hands on people or prevent people from putting their hands on you, right? Otherwise, you're just walking around carrying a bunch of shit someone can take off of you and use against you or the member or some other member of the public. And too
Yep.
many guys, men and women, get dressed in a phone booth in their mind every day, thinking they're superhero, and they're not. And they, by luck or by sheer numbers, they make it through. I when I have people come to our class, the no one really gives us a problem. Everybody's really happy to be there, but every once in a while you get a person that's like, oh, well, I wouldn't do it this way, I'd do it this way. There's always somebody that doesn't train, right? So but they typically come from an agency where not a lot happens.
Right.
The people that come from agencies where shit goes down on a daily basis, they ain't the problem.
Right.
They're
Right.
usually listening, they're usually asking questions because they know, shit, this could happen to me in 3 hours, right?
Right.
Whereas the person that doesn't see a lot of activity, doesn't see a lot of things going down, they tend to be more difficult to get through to. But that's when my whole thing with them is, hey, you know a better way, show the class. I'll stop the whole class. I've done this. I've literally, when
Nope.
someone said, "Oh, I wouldn't." Well, what about? Well, I don't know. Is that gonna? Oh, how do you do it? Oh, I do something else. Come show us. And there's 50 cops in there. 25 black belts instructors walking around on top of the 50 that are cops, right,
Right.
teaching. And oh, well, no, I'm not ready to do that today. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Exactly.
Right. And we do a lot of pressuring in our class, so we're what we start off positionally, and then by the end of the class, it's full. You know, not only it's not just rolling; it's rolling with your gun belts on and your vest on,
Yep.
and people have sim guns. They can shoot them. They can pull the sim gun off and shoot you in the face. What I mean? Like there's literally it's a fight. Okay,
Yep.
and you know those people, their opinions are flushed down the toilet in about the first 10 seconds of those iterations.
Right. Rob, I want to be respectful of your time. So the last question I ask everybody on the show, this is it's called Twisted Remedies. It's mine. Jiu-jitsu is obviously one of mine. It sounds like it's definitely one of yours. I do cold plunges. I do other stuff. So I ask everybody, what are your twisted remedies?
Yeah, number one thing for me is that, yeah, I train a lot and obviously do a lot of jujitsu. I spend a lot of time with my kids. I got three boys, my wife and I. I'm married to my high school sweetheart, so we spend a lot of time together. Um, I love going out in the woods. I love nature. I love being outside. I love running in the woods, backpack on. Hiking in the woods with my dog. Um, Bass fishing, I go bass fishing a lot. I love bass fishing, stuff like that. I like being out in nature. I like, especially if it's raining. If it's raining out, if it's pouring rain and it's not lightning and it's any decent temperature whatsoever, and I'm not actively working, you'll find me out in the woods with a raincoat on, listening to the rain pour on my head. I love the outdoors. I love the stars at night. I love nature, I guess. So kayaking, swimming, mountain biking, running, ATVs. I got ATVs. I ride in the woods a lot, ATVs. So I like that kind of stuff. Um, Not a big like book reader or even movies. I watch them occasionally, but I'm not a big movie guy. I like to just enjoy the outdoors. I think when you go out to nature and you, especially early in the morning, I'm an early riser. I'm up every day, 4:30, quarter to 5. If it's 5 o'clock, I'm not out of bed yet. I'm probably sick, because which is rare. I'm up before 5 every single day, and I like that early rise, and everybody else is still sleeping, and we're getting work done while no one else is even out of bed yet. I like that kind
Right.
of. To me, that's like fulfilling. Like I know that by 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, I've already trained, 2 to 3 times, and other people are just waking up. So to me, that's a like a mental win, I guess.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great. That's a
really
good
cool.
list.
Yeah, that's what I like.
That's good. Anything you want to plug? Anything coming up? And what's on the horizon that you want people to know about?
Yeah, sure. So we um we have a couple of Officer Survival Series classes coming up in Connecticut in May. One is um almost sold out, and that's the traditional 8-day course. If you go to officersurvivalseries.com, everything's listed there. Well, not everything, everything that's open to the public or open to other agencies, because we do a lot of closed door classes that never
Yep.
even make the website. But the
Right.
ones that are open are still on there, but they're getting pretty full. And then Invictus is a organization I'm part of, and they promote jiu-jitsu for police officers. They have a camp coming up Lake Tahoe, Nevada, California line right there, in July. And if you go to the Invictus website, all the stuff is there for that. That's a really great camp. There'll be some awesome instructors there. Chad Lyman will be there. Myself, Dan Simler. There's a whole bunch of people will be there for that. It's a really good time, and it's beautiful out there. We were there last year. It's pretty awesome, and you get to meet like-minded people in this job doing this kind of thing. So that's really cool. And then in the fall, Chad Lyman and I from C4C, we're doing and Dan Simler from Massachusetts. I don't know if you know Dan. Dan's legendary jiu-jitsu black belt from New England. He's a cop in Massachusetts now, and we'll be doing a police grappling summit. It'll be in Las Vegas, and it'll be in October. And Paul Taylor is a use of force expert on human movement and stuff like that. He's organizing it all. And Justin Dodge, he's a full-time SWAT operator out of Denver Police. He was the one that was run over by the fire truck, lost his leg in the Denver Nuggets
Yep.
celebration parade a few years ago, and he has a
Yep.
prosthetic now, but he's back full-time on the TAC team. And he's a second degree black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. He'll be one of the instructors as well. Justin's an amazing individual, and to hear his story is like it's pretty cool to listen to him. He makes you want to like let your cape fly out over the city when you get done listening to him. So we'll be doing that, and then my friend, obviously Matt Larson, black belt under Matt in the combatives, which is if you go to Combatives University, it explains it all there. But it's shooting. It's not just that you have to be like jiu-jitsu black belt, but you also have to have competition or fight experience with video
Yep.
proof. You have to
Right.
have firearms background, and proof of your firearms proficiency, TAC medical proficiency, weight training proficiency with basic lifts. So there's a lot to it, right? To get that qualification. Anyway, Matt has the organization Combatives University, and they have a summit every year where they have instructors from all over come. There's people that are law enforcement trainers. There's military trainers. Craig Douglas is always there, a great friend of mine with ShivWorks. The Knife Control Concepts guys are there. That'll be in Mississippi the same week as the Las Vegas thing with Chad and I, but on the weekend, the far end of it. So that's coming up. And we just started a Connecticut Police Jiu-Jitsu team in Connecticut. So we had our first event today at my school in Manchester, and basically we have an Instagram page, Connecticut Police Jiu-Jitsu team. We'll have open mat sessions about every 3 to 4 months at different locations around the state because we have affiliate system for OSS. So there's a bunch of
Right.
jiu-jitsu schools all throughout Connecticut that are affiliated with us, where cops can go train, and we'll have training available to them in those months where cops can all come together and train. And then we'll do some seminars through that, and we'll raise money, and it'll go to some cause to help a cop or something, is what we'll do with that. So in Massachusetts, I got that idea from Casey Lamont in Massachusetts. He runs the Mass PJJ team. Casey's a state trooper up in Massachusetts, and him and Mike Vargas and Scott LaPointe, they all run that. They're amazing. So that kind of gave me the idea to put a little more organization to ours. And we're hoping at some point we could have like competition training between the states, like Connecticut, Massachusetts, New
Yeah.
York, Delaware, whatever, and maybe even a tournament. So
That's great.
yeah,
You're a busy guy.
that's what's coming up.
Awesome. Again, I'm very excited to have you on. I appreciate your time. I greatly appreciate everything you're doing for the cause. This is, I wish I had been ahead of all of this stuff early in my career, but kudos to you for driving this, and that's great. Thank you, and I'm sure we'll chat again at some point.
Excellent. If you're ever down in Connecticut, you got to come by our school.
Absolutely.
All right. Bring Sergio. You guys come down.
I will. I will.
Well, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider a like, a subscribe, or a share, or even writing a review. This helps the podcast grow and gets the word out to more people. As always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.